Oh, I'm consenting to be recorded, huh?
Yes. You never got my consent before.
Me either.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Audit Committee meeting of the City of New York on Wednesday, May 26th. I'd now like to have the secretary have a roll call. I don't know if it's me or...
I can't hear her.
No, nor can I.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now.
Now? Okay. All right, maybe with the earphones. Okay. Starting with our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair.
Present.
Mark Kaplan.
Present.
Bud Larson.
Present.
Representing Mayor Bill de Blasio, Paul Timus. Let's see, Paul. Paul, we can't hear you.
You're muted,
him,
Paul.
Paul, you're mute.
I have him coming up as mute.
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
Present.
Unmuted.
Thank you. Representing
My dog would like to participate. Is that all right?
Representing Comptroller Scott Stringer, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
Representing Public Advocate Jimani Williams, Michael Toomey.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of...
I move it.
Thank you.
That's my job.
You could be the mover. Going to the agenda, the first item of business is the presentation of the financial statements for the Health and Hospital Corp. I don't know who, I'm looking at a screen that has over 35 people. So please identify yourself and identify if your auditors are here or who's going to be the lead. Could somebody just let us know?
So this is, hopefully you could hear me. This is Jay Weinman. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm the corporate controller for New York City Health and Hospitals. I thought John Oberg may join us. He's the CFO and Senior Vice President. I don't think he's made it yet. So I'll make the introductions.
John's on, Jay. John is on.
Oh, John is on. Okay. And I'll make the introductions of who's on the call, and I'll turn it over to John for a couple of comments. So I'm Jay Wyman. John Oberg is here, CFO. James Linhart, Nicole Fleming, and Joseph DeBroya. And our auditors, Grant Thornton, is here, and you could introduce yourselves.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tammy Urgency. I'm the partner on New York City Health and Hospitals financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2020 that we'll be discussing today.
And I'm Lou Feuerstein, Managing Director with Grant Thornton, working with Tammy on the year-end audit.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll turn it over to John Oberg.
Can't hear you, John.
You're on mute, John.
Hold on. Okay, I'm on.
All right.
There's a tie.
Is that good? Yeah, I'm missing a tie. I know I am. One of the few benefits of COVID, perhaps. I will say that my hope is for next year, right, we can do this in person. We're starting to come back. Feels good to be back in the office. So, hopefully next year. We always look forward to meeting with this group. I think these meetings are interesting for me personally, right? Because it does put into perspective, the journey we've been on at Health and Hospitals, and it has been, quite a ride. Some of what you'll see here is, we'll tell the story from, a binary perspective. And it's absolutely fascinating when you kind of look at the data and see where Health and Hospitals has been. But it's been a historic year, remarkable year. Very proud of Health and Hospitals. Throughout the pandemic, we were the first in, right, responding. We certainly, we're standing up new services. Building out new space. I'm sure many of you, kind of followed it all through, the press as it was unfolding. But by any measure, it was truly remarkable and I think heroic. We literally had, tripled, our ICU space. We were building new ICU capacity in the midst of the pandemic, and then even on a personal level, we were losing our own doctors and nurses to COVID, right? And we were in the same units where they were fighting the battle. So there'd be a long story to tell. I think it helps clear your head, when you get meetings like this, we can kind of explain, what went on. Now, we've certainly, and we'll go through the numbers, financially, we perform very well, I will say. And we'll go through some of the specifics. But, at the end of the day, when we tally this all up, right, our estimate of what health and hospitals will spend on COVID was $1.7 billion, could reach $2 billion before it's all said and done. That's just health and hospitals, COVID-related expenditures. We were also asked, by the mayor's office, to help with T2, we call it, testing and tracing. Our whole enterprise, right? We staffed up, hired thousands of people, testers, tracers, a lot of resources expended there. That could reach another $2 billion. So again, we're working through that with the city. The city's been great partners, DOH, MH, excellent partners. So I think the city in total has a lot to be proud of. From a financial perspective, as I had mentioned, health and hospitals will spend $2 billion thus far. We've only received, and I use the word only lightly, $1.2 billion in provider relief funds. Now, without those dollars from the federal government, right, we would never have made it. So we're very, grateful for those funds. We have also received about $260 million, $266 million from FEMA. You add that all up against the $2 billion, right, and we're still short. So our efforts now are to work with FEMA, following their protocols, which I think are evolving, right, to secure, the balance of those funds. There's also a lot of work to be done between the nexus between, the patient or the provider relief funds and nexus and FEMA. Like, how do those two work together? I think is something that still needs to be, sorted out at the federal government level. In terms of our performance, and as I had mentioned, looking at, the numbers, when COVID hit, our volumes plummeted in the outpatient area as well as in the ED. And I don't think we're any different than any of the other healthcare systems. And our volumes even dropped remarkably in the inpatient area. But our length of stay, and intensity of the patients we were serving obviously increased. So our hospitals were full, even though our discharges were down. And I think the thing that was really amazing to us as we're kind of looking at this all unfold is while our utilization is declining, right, our revenues were going up. And again, that's the intensity of the patients that we were seeing. And I also will say a lot of the things that we had been doing, we talked about in prior sessions, our strategic initiatives were all unfolding at the same time, and they didn't break down. The new systems that we had put in place for revenue cycle and patient billing, right? At one point in time, we thought the whole system would collapse, right? We'd have to pull people out of facilities. It wasn't safe for them to be there, right? We were into planning stages of a completely different sort than what we experience in terms of our day-to-day activity. I will also say one of the things that really helped us out that perhaps maybe didn't help other healthcare systems is that, health and hospitals is really a large part, subcapitation fixed, payment system based on our relationship with Health First and Metro Plus, right? We get a fixed amount of money per patient that's attributed to us. The stability of that funding stream helped us tremendously as volumes were dropping. So that, I think, is just another benefit when you hear us talk about value-based payment. That stability of that constant, funding stream certainly helped us out here. At the same time, attribution, Medicaid enrollment was up, 15, almost 20% across the city, right? The city relaxed its Medicaid enrollment rules so people could have health insurance. That benefited health and hospitals. We've had, I think, somewhere near 75,000 new members, and each one of those members, throws off a funding stream for us. Our strategic initiatives now are really to retain that new patient base. And then I'll close by saying, as I had mentioned earlier, our strategic initiatives plan, in my mind, is by all accounts has been successful. There's obviously more work that we need to do, and we're hoping to emerge, from COVID stronger. But I think what you hear from us in the future, along our lines of, where we want to focus the system, you heard us talk more about value-based payment. You hear us talk about, various efficiencies within the system. Our surgical efficiencies and volumes are at all-time highs. We kind of rebuilt how we, manage our surgical services, rev cycle and managed care contracting. Obviously, more work to be done there, and then growing ambulatory care, telehealth. So a lot still going on, but I think overall we're doing fine, and we're continuing to improve. But I think the future, in some respects, will hinge on FEMA funds and making sure that we continue to have good, productive relationships with our other government partners. So that's my opening statement. Whatever remarks, I'm happy to take any questions, or I'll turn it over to Jay for the rest of the program. I think that he's got the real meat of it. The numbers are important, and I know you guys all are very interested in seeing those.
Thank you. That was very informative. Jay?
All right. Well, thank you, John, for painting that picture about COVID. Without question, we incurred a lot of costs, as John said, and you'll see that on the financial statements, over $1 billion worth of costs related to the pandemic. And then on the expenses, all those expenses related to taking care of these patients and all the preparations that we needed. I'm sorry, am I on mute?
I can hear you, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I thought I heard something. Okay. So, the financial statements reflect all that. So you'll see major swings in some of the categories. Patient revenues, you'll see grants revenue, where we got the provider relief funds from the federal government. That's in the numbers. And of course, all we had for the protective equipment for employees, patients, all was in there. So I will turn it over to Joseph DeBroya to give just a quick summary of the financials and some of the major highlights.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Joseph DeBroya. My role is to prepare the financial statements, and as such, I'll briefly go over some of the highlights from our fiscal year 2020 income statement that you've had an opportunity to read through. We'll kick off with the revenue section. Our revenues have increased $1.1 billion over fiscal year 2019. Net patient service revenue has increased by $638 million, mainly due to increased case mix index, as John had mentioned, and that's really related to COVID. One other thing in this net patient service revenue area that increased is also the Dish Max revenue that increased by $142 million. The next up are appropriations from the City of New York, or also known as tax levy. Tax levy decreased by $391 million due to a decrease in cash received from the city for collective bargaining and other subsidies. Grant revenue is the area where our CARES Act money is recorded, and grant revenue increased by $850 million, mainly due to CARES Act pandemic funding. Other revenues increased by $60 million, largely due to increases in 340B pharmaceutical program revenue. Those are the major points from the revenue section. I'll go over the expense section now. Expenses, as Jay had mentioned, increased over $1 billion from the previous year, mainly due to COVID. PS, or personal services, increased $132 million due to an FTE full-time equivalent increase of 2,400 and the use of overtime. OTPS services increased $1 billion, primarily related to COVID expenditures, particularly in areas of temp staffing, so temp nurses and such, an increase of $645 million, and medical and surgical supplies increased $180 million. Pension decreased $147 million, and as you know, pension and OPEB are calculated by the New York City Office of the Actuary. OPEB also decreased $139 million as calculated by the actuary. Affiliation contracted services increased $71 million or 6% for new programs and cost of living adjustment increases. Depreciation increased $56 million due to Epic and related COVID facility purchases that we've had. Let's not forget the other changes in that position. That also increased $85.1 million. That's mainly due to capital contributions funded by the City of New York and the capital contributions funded by grantors and donors, mainly due to Section 428 FEMA mitigation at Coney Island Hospital. Those are the highlights from our income statement for fiscal year 2020. I'll turn it over back to Jay, or if you guys have any additional questions.
May I ask one question, please? You go to page 4, you say other changes in net deficit is $460 million as capital contribution. That's a plus, is it? Am I right? That it was a bigger capital contribution all year?
Mark, you're coming in a little.
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I was looking at the changes in net deficit, and the capital contribution this past year was $460 million. How does that affect the net? Is that you get that money in, and that reduces your deficit? Is that it? And where does that money come from?
So the capital contributions come in two forms. Most of it comes with city funding towards the capital purchases. Because this was a COVID year, we did get some funding through donors for some of the capital. But I'd say most of the capital contributions comes from outside either grants, and Joseph had mentioned one of them was FEMA. So the FEMA mitigation project, as a result of Sandy, is still going on at Coney Island Hospital. That was a piece of it. And so it does change the net assets, but it is below the operating income loss.
Thank you.
If you could, because of COVID, we've had significant change in grant revenue. Could you describe a little bit what the process has been as far as obtaining that grant revenue and what drives the grant decisions? Is it related to direct expenses that you file claims for, or how is it determined?
Yeah, and John, you could help me a little bit, but the first tranche of money that we got was from the CARES Act, called Provider Relief Funds. That was given to us because we were in the heart of the pandemic. One of these areas treating patients. There were several tranches that we got, totaling about $1 billion. At the time, there was no requirement to report what we were spending on. That report is coming up soon, within the next few months. But that was so that no provider would be left without the funds to treat the patients. We still have to report on that. FEMA would come after the funds from the CARES Act and would require us to submit, just like we would have done in Sandy the last time we filed for FEMA. We would file claims with the support. FEMA would review and then fund those requests. So we are in the midst of FEMA claims. We've had some FEMA reimbursement during our fiscal year 21, But for fiscal year 20, it wasn't necessary. We had $1 billion worth of expenses. We had $1 billion worth of CARES funds. It kept our cash balances where they needed to be so we could meet our obligations. So at that time, there was no need to file for FEMA.
Just so that I understand, so basically what's happening now is that you're getting grants in a very traditional FEMA sense where you have specific needs and you file claim for. At the beginning, because of the nature of COVID, it almost gave you a unspecified grant because of the crisis that you didn't have to document that you had a need for it. But the question then is, do you have to then later on provide any kind of justification for that initial funds?
We have to report. The initial deadline was at the end of June. I understand that that's moved back some, maybe July, maybe August. We are required to produce all the documentation, just like it was a regular grant. We have to provide. The purpose of the grant is to provide services for COVID. The CARES Act gives us a little bit more flexibility than FEMA. FEMA will not pay for permanent work. So, some of the work that we did at one of our hospitals to provide extra ICU beds for the patients, they wouldn't pay for that. It would be considered, permanent work, would be reimbursable under CARES. Any of the permanent, work that we may have done in other facilities, they wouldn't pay for. So there are some, subtle differences between the two grants. But for each one, we have a team of people within finance that deal exclusively with these funding sources and the reports.
And so I'm assuming that given where things are now, that process is probably going to be closing out in the next 6 months or so.
FEMA never closes out, it appears.
I can relate to that, but we may be done with the reporting. It's always subject to audit. In fact, we would expect an audit with the magnitude of the monies that we've gotten. But, we should probably finish our FEMA claims, probably by the end of this fiscal year, I think. If John is still on, he would know a little bit better. But we've already submitted a lot of claims during our fiscal year 21. Again, in fiscal 20, we had no obligation from FEMA to pay us anything. So, that's why we didn't include anything in our fiscal 20 financial statements. But we are preparing that during 21. Thank you. On a completely different topic, and you're probably going to tell me to ask the actuary, but did the actuary give you some indication of why you had the drop in pensions?
Yes. And Jessica could probably explain some of that, some of it has to do with changes of the estimates. Joseph? You may be on mute, Joseph.
But
I think there were most changes in assumptions and some of the deferred inflows that we've had to record. But have to take a look.
So I guess the short answer is, after the actuary does their analysis and it determines that there's been a change of estimate, we do record. In fact, we don't really question the actuary's calculation, but Grant Thornton does audit those assumptions and independently to determine whether they are valid, and that's what we record. We could probably go over, some of the assumptions, but we probably don't know all the assumptions that the actuary uses.
Okay, I'll direct my question to the actuary.
But I've seen this with other business units.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the topic. It's just the fact that their result is counter to the general trend everywhere else. So I'm curious as to what the actuary is recognizing here.
But it would be worth noting that in fiscal 19, we had a one-time increase in our pension liability due to a cohort that they had previously missed in other calculations. So that would help to explain why some of that costs decreased in addition to changes in assumptions.
So part of this, when you look back over a period of time, this is coming back closer to the normal trend.
Yes. So I think that once you took out that one-time lump sum catch-up, quote unquote, that we had to report in 19, it would be fairly normalized across the years.
Okay, thank you, Nicole.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Wait,
I should add, though, actually, to Bud's question about the grants, but you should potentially expect to see some FEMA money reported in fiscal 22 also, because as you may recall, we can't report any grant monies now per GASB until we have essentially an obligated PW. And I'm not certain that we'll have all of our FEMA grants obligated before fiscal year end. So you may see some of our expenditures from fiscal 20 and fiscal 21 actually reflected in the grant revenue side for FEMA in fiscal 22 as a result.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah. Thank you.
if I can, first of all, a couple of general comments. I hate to point this out, but the actual name of the city begins with a capital T. And the other thing is, that's up to you. But then, if you look at something, you refer to risk incentive pool receivables. What are that? What are those things?
So those are, the relationship we have both with Health First and Metro Plus. There's on what we call a risk arrangement, where there's a per member per month that we're given. There's a fixed sum of money that they're allocating to us, whether we use it or not. If we don't use it and we're not charging, patient costs against that revenue, then there's a settlement at the end where they give us the money, and then that's part of the risk pools. And there's really two parts to the risk pool. One is the risk that we take by taking care of the patients for the money that they're going to give us, that fixed sum. And the other is our incentive pools when we do much better on our performance, both medically and operationally. And there is some money that they'll give us as well. Most of it has to do with the risk side. Those monies that had not been spent against the contract that are still owed to us.
It just seems to me that if you're a layman reading this thing, a little more explanation might help there to try to figure out what's being said here. So I point that out. And then there's one, essentially, your credit rating, which looks good, is based upon the fact that the city, it's really a city obligation. Am I right?
The obligation, it is backed up by the city, but it is our obligation to pay.
I understand.
Yeah.
Without the city guarantee, I doubt you'd have that kind of excellent credit rating. Am I right?
That may be.
So it seems to me, think about that. And then if you refer to the inflow of resources, determine, I guess it's really the amount of, I got a whole bunch of things, but let me ask you one more. I've got a whole bunch. You refer to on page 7, new debt from the Citibank. It's $30 million of new debt. Hard to say debt from the Citibank. All right. And then primarily through changes. I'm trying to think things I noticed that require. I think I'm happy to send this. So look, if you look at page 10, you refer to ERP project budget assigned through. How does the budget get assigned?
I'm sorry, you were going a little in and out on page. What page are you on? I'm sorry.
The third bullet from the bottom, you refer to the ERP project budget assigned. How did budget get assigned?
I think that it's just intended as a synonym for allocated, reported, associated. It's not a term of art. It's just a term to demonstrate how much was actually allocated for the purpose.
Well, let me have a little fun with you. On page 11, long-term debt. And right away you say hospitals approximately some current and long-term debt. So why do you include current under the caption long-term debt?
So that's a reporting requirement where we actually have to have in our MD&A an explanation of all of our debt. We break out the current and the long term, I think, also in an attempt to make it easier to cross-reference to the full footnote that explains it in the financial statements.
Well, I'm figure out the 738 million in current and long-term debt. I didn't know how much was current, how much was long-term. Does it tell me that?
It's further broken out in the footnote regarding debt, which is, sorry, let me get to that.
I point out that at this thing,
sorry, yes, thank you, 36.
You got the thing mixed up here. That's all.
All right, we can take a look at that as a heading.
All right, let me see more here.
As Mark is looking for any other comments he has, was there a management letter produced for HHC?
Yes, there was.
Because I don't seem to have it.
I think, I believe, is James on?
I am. We did send it over.
Yeah.
Is there anything significant in it?
There was one significant deficiency on our grants, not a material variance on what we reported on the financial statements, and it had to do with managing the accruals on the grants, and to do a much better job at doing that. We've been working with our own grants department to ensure that the reporting is more on an accrual basis, and and I think we've fixed that for fiscal 21. Other than that, I'm going by memory because I don't have it in front of me, but there was typical comments on security issues relative to IT, and James, you might know because I didn't bring it in front of me.
Well, yeah, there was an IT user access review, which is just a status. We brought about the status of prior year's comments. There was just it was corrected. There was an issue about unidentifiable users, which was corrected as well. Grant Thornton said management was able to provide sufficient evidence regarding all users as needed. No further action required. There was a segregation of duties with regard to PeopleSoft users. That as well was remediated for FY 2020.
I think the short of it, I'm sorry, James, I think the short of it is the comments were either similar or they were remediated. You know, the one that I just mentioned, I think, was the most significant because it was listed as a significant deficiency, and it is something that we're working on.
Were there any prior year comments that weren't remedied?
Say that again?
Were there any prior year findings in the management letter that weren't remedied?
Yeah, the grant one was one that came up for a second comment.
But no other prior year comments remained unresolved?
No.
Let me go on then.
Did you have any more comments?
If I may, there's a provision for bad debts on page 19. Is that really bad debts? Are they somehow related to what bad debts did you have of that magnitude as distinguished from patient accounts receivable?
So our bad debts have to do with patients with no insurance and no ability to pay. We do provide a fair number, especially on the outpatient side, of patients that come in. We don't restrict access to any patient. We try to get them insurance. There are a number of people that are ineligible and for insurance, and they don't pay.
Well,
and
I assume that's the case, but you have patient accounts receivable net 2 lines down of 655 million, and then a provision for bad debts of 400 odd million. Is one assumed in the other, or are they really different things?
Well, they're different. So the accounts receivable is net of bad debts. We make an allowance for that. The provision is the actual expense of the bad debt, and that is because that's a non-cash item, gets added back. So it's an adjustment to the cash flow because it's in the the reduction to our income gets added back.
Well, I must say to a layman that juxtaposition of 400 debts in the next line down, patient accounts receivable, that's 655 million. It looks odd. How anybody?
I would say that the cash flow to a layman is probably inexplainable.
Okay.
To say the least. Are there any other questions from any of the members towards HHC?
Give me another minute, will you, Mike?
Okay.
Flipping pages. I wonder whether some. Well, I guess. Reimbursement. That's it. Now, there's something here that says that you will reimburse the city.
What page, Mark?
Page 25. But if the city is the backstop for all your financial situation, to the extent that you have to reimburse the city, but you need the money to run the business, in effect, the city, the money's moving around.
But yeah, this is an agreement that's done every year when we do the financial plan of what Health and Hospitals is going to pay, what the city is going to pay us for. The malpractice, the medical malpractice, has been something that we've been paying for years. The city pays on our behalf. The law department, we pay them back, through the tax levy.
But if you need the money to run the operation, in effect, the city pays you back what you paid them, right?
Well, we do pay them. The cash flow of when those expenses are incurred and when we pay them, there is some lag. But we do pay that back. And we usually pay it back, sometime early in the following year.
It's also a question of how it's reported, though, Mark, because if the city does want to demonstrate that H&H is paying its bills to the city, that we're not solely reliant on the city in order to exist. So it's a question of financial reporting. If they just gave us all our money and did behind the scenes summation of what we would have paid them taken from what they're going to give us, essentially they're just reporting that they're giving us money and we're just reporting that we're taking it. But from the city's perspective and H&H's perspective, that masks what is truly going on. We are foregoing, if you want to take that approach, a certain amount of monies in order to pay them for specific liabilities and expenses that we owe them each fiscal year. And what remains is a deficit that they then help us to fill by giving us money at the end of the fiscal year. So it's not just a behind the scenes single line entry that anybody wants to make, because there is a true demonstration of us taking responsibility for certain costs.
But from the standpoint of somebody who's rating your bonds, whatever happens with the hospital, in the end, the city has to make that good, right?
Ultimately, the city is fiscally responsible, we believe, for any financial liabilities with regard to our bonds. However, H&H does issue its own bonds. The city obviously issues bonds on behalf of H&H, and then H&H has its own separate bonds that it issues. But it is with the full faith and credit and the assistance of the bond ratings of the city.
So, realistically, whatever a corporation does, if it's short money, the city puts it in.
Not always. But yes, we do report a deficit. Unlike the city, we are able to report deficits. So there have been years where we have reported deficits where they have not, quote unquote, made us whole at the end of the year.
I don't understand. I suspect that bond raters are assuming that if there is a hole, the city's going to make it good. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that rate.
There's no assumption. It's legally true, and it's demonstrated in these financial statements and in the financial statements for the city, which you review every year. We are legally tied to the city of New York, and we are a reporting entity of the city of New York. With that comes a liability of the city of New York to ultimately support what our liabilities are when it comes to issuance of bonds. It's not an assumption, it's clearly stated.
I assume as much.
Mark, I think you're looking at this strictly from an investor bond perspective. I think what they're trying to do in this is to provide more information on operations, because there is a real liability here for medical malpractice, and it's important that that be highlighted as a cost that they're responsible for.
And Mark, also it speaks to, if we demonstrate that we're responsible for our own medical malpractice, it helps us argue that when and if the time comes that we are sued, because everybody views the city of New York as having extremely deep pockets. If we can demonstrate that we stand on our own with regard to specific liabilities, it also helps us to potentially defend ourselves in those situations.
But any lawyer, give me any lawyer right through that.
Yes, but you can argue it.
Now, I want to do another thing, if you don't mind. Page 28, you would say that restricted debt service consists of assets restricted by each revenue bond official statement. Is that true, or is it the indenture? Usually an official statement's like a prospectus. Isn't it by the indenture?
I'm sorry, where is this on page?
28.
28. Which section?
It says here, restricted debt service consists of assets restricted, I don't know why it's a comma there, by each revenue bond official statement. I'm assuming what you mean there is that the indenture under which it's issued, rather than the statement.
So each revenue bond's official statement. The bond does have an official statement that's issued when we issue the bonds.
Yeah, but isn't that?
And I think that's what's being referred to.
No, but is it the official statement, or is it actually an indenture that you enter into?
This is not referring to the legal structure. It's just referring back to the statement that comes out with the bond.
That's not what restricts you. It's what the underlying indenture does, is restrict you, and then that's described in the official statement. That's just a lawyer. I'm sorry. And then,
all right, we'll look at the wording on that.
And you got something else in while you're on that page. And last sentence. For certain collective bargaining units, time is paid out at the current rate. How can something's wrong there?
There are
just think there's something
for a collective bargained unit when somebody leaves and they have accrued vacation and sick time, they are being paid out at the rate that they are earning at the time that they leave.
I understand.
So that's what that means.
Okay, one or two more things. On page 29, you refer to bank balances were insured or collateralized. You must have a peanut amount of insured bank balances because the limitation is $250,000. And efforts continue to cover remaining balances where permitted, when permitted. So usually I've seen that you collateralize everything over the 250. Something different than I'm accustomed to seeing. I quit, Mike. I got other things to do. I've got one more thing to raise with you. You refer to the capital funds are invested in 10-year treasury note. And then in the government securities, you refer to something 2-year treasury notes. It's a little, the two different sections talk a little, you don't actually talk to each other very well.
And you're on page 34?
You're looking at 34 and 35. But the other thing you have here is, and this I've had trouble with, you say the issue on page 38, you say this issuance generated a premium of $21.4 million. That means you sold the bonds at more than par? Now you get a premium on the issuance. That's right.
Right, I got it.
That's a big premium. It's over almost 20%.
I'm sorry, I don't see where you're reading that.
Page 38.
On page 38.
You referred to a $112 million tax-exempt security and a premium of $21 million on that issuance. So that means for every $1,000 bond you issue, you owed $1,000 plus $21. So it shows that you were actually selling it at a better rate than indicated by the interest rate on the bond. That's what a premium does.
Yeah, we had a premium on the 13 bonds. Yes.
But that's a lot of premium on a $100 million bond. I'm just curious how that got that high. You've done that again on the 2010. Yes. And on 2000.
Yes, you just may have some details. I don't have it on me. Okay. I couldn't answer that.
Just unusual. Then on page 39, in two little I's, you refund and redeem for one, and the other is the refunded the fees. Was there an actual difference between redeem and defease? I guess there is. In one case, you paid it off. In the other case, you put the money in an account and paid it out as it goes. Is that right?
Yeah, I couldn't answer that until we go back to the details. We could get back to the committee on that.
In both cases, could you look into that and supply an answer to Katrina Stauffer, the
yes.
committee secretary?
That's not I'm sorry, I shouldn't do this. It's just a lot of stuff.
So I just, not that I'm an expert here, but defeasance is when you're replacing your current collateral that's securing your loan or debt with new collateral versus a refunding where you're quite literally extinguishing the debt.
Well, okay. Okay. The rest of my stuff, language, I'll be happy to give somebody a markup instead of getting everybody here tied up with this stuff. Because it's not.
All right, Mark, I'll ask you to send, you'll make arrangements with Katrina and we'll get it over to the hospital corp.
Yep.
Because
are there any other questions? Hearing none, I'd like to thank you all for coming this morning, and it was a very informative session.
Well, if I could comment, I have a couple of people in my family who are somehow involved in the health system. And I think you folks have done a masterful job of conducting the activities. That must be heart-wrenching to do the way you have done it and provide the care for people at sea.
Thank you. I think it was a tough year, but it ended up well for our patients. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is the Audit Bureau of the Controller's Office report that they're going to move this on to the City Council.
Just ignore that. I can't shut when I get a cell phone call, it does this. I can't talk now. Bye. Hi, Mark. Okay.
I see her now. Marjorie?
Yes, hello, good morning.
Hi, Marjorie.
Good morning to everyone. I'm Marjorie Landa. I'm the Deputy Controller for Audit and Investigation for the Controller's Office. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. This is our second week coming in occasionally into the office, so getting the Zoom set up was its own accomplishment. Looks like Jackie, you may be downstairs for me today. Is that right? All right. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk about what the Audit Bureau did this year. In the wake of COVID, we too have a story, not quite as dramatic as H&H's, but as with everybody, this has been quite a year, and it included, the end of the fiscal year we're reporting on. So I really want to start by thanking the senior management who are here with me from the Audit Bureau, who really are responsible for the reports they and the amazing teams they have working under them. We have Faggy Hornick, who is the Deputy Controller for the Assistant Controller for Assistant Deputy Controller. There's like so many names in that, but she runs the financial audit side and special reports. And Edward Carey, who is the Assistant Deputy Controller for Management Audit. Julia Davis, who is our Director for Investigations, Research and Investigations, and Andre De Silva, who is our Director for IT Cybersecurity Audits. And they together are responsible for all of the reports that we put out every year, and in particular in this last fiscal year. Kishwan was the Chief of Staff, couldn't be with us today, but he is also working ably with all of us to get the reports out. And then, of course, as you know, behind us is an extensive team of auditors, accountants, engineers, IT professionals, lawyers. And this year, I really have to give a particular shout out to the support staff, because the support that we needed going home and telecommuting was enormous. And, we appreciate them every year. They don't always get the recognition they need. They were called upon and more than rose to the occasion. So as, graphically described by H&H, we had a really challenging year due to COVID. Our last day in the office was March 12th, 2020. So we started working remotely on March 13th. It was an abrupt shift for everybody. And as I'm sure all of you have experienced in one way or another, your home office setup is not necessarily what your physical office setup might be. And so the controller's office IT staff had to get our nearly 800 person office up and running from everybody's bedrooms and kitchens and living rooms. And they did it, but it took a while. And the while that sorry about that. The time that it took to do that was the period in which the Audit Bureau typically gets out the bulk of its reports. So you may have noticed our total number of reports is significantly lower than it had been in the prior years. And that's really why we had a huge shift where audits couldn't be finished with the field work, where it was difficult getting them completed, because the agencies we're trying to audit, which included H&H and the Department of Health and other critical first responders who truly were busy saving lives, had a little less time to respond to us when we wanted responses to the audits. But nonetheless, between March 13th and the end of the fiscal year, rather than getting out 45 or so audits, which we often do, it's the end of the cycle, so all the reports are coming out. We managed to get out 22 reports. That was 12 full audit reports, 8 letter reports, and 2 investigative reports. And that was issuing final reports to the world, figuring out how to get that done from kitchens and living rooms and bedrooms while we're, many of us, nursing sick family, many of us sick as well. We, like everybody else, were severely impacted by COVID, and yet, as usual, the work continued. And I think we stand, behind and very proudly behind the work that we managed to get done this year, in this past fiscal year that we're reporting on. So, in briefly, you've had our report. Just highlighting that we did in total get out 40 GAGAS audits and 8 special reports in the year. The monetary effect was $32.4 million in actual and potential revenue and savings, and another slightly over $500 million, $508 million in cost avoidance from claims. And 31.7 million in potential revenue and savings in this. So the work done was hard and well worth it. A few highlights from the year that I think are notable. It is the last year of this administration that the last full year we'll be reporting on. And among the notable highlights, we are still auditing NYCHA. There's a lot of work to be done. And one of the themes I think that runs through some of our more notable audits this year is some of the difficulties we have as an oversight agency of agencies that the city doesn't entirely control. NYCHA is primary among them. So we did 2 NYCHA audits this year that we're reporting on. One of their maintenance of roofs, and particularly the way in which they handle roofs that are under warranty. If anybody has been following the audits we've done or just following NYCHA in general, that the roof problem at NYCHA is a huge problem because a leaky roof means a leaking building, means lead. It is a lead issue, leaching, but it's a mold issue. It's a health issue. And those have been really preeminent. The federal government's come in and put a monitor in large part because of the health concerns. So we looked at what they're doing with the roofs and the warranties. And from a fiscal perspective, it was very alarming that they are not, even where they have a new roof, and it is under warranty. They're not adequately maintaining them in order to be able to utilize the warranty. So there's a lot of good money being thrown after good money being thrown after good money, where a new roof will be put on, it will not be maintained properly. Rather than maintaining it, you'll have a laborer come and throw some tar on what appears to be a hole when there is a leak. And if and when, which is rare, NYCHA calls on the guarantor to come and, repair the roof under the warranty, they say, we can't do that. You've already ruined it. So it's a lot of money not being well spent. And it causes real human problems. Our other audit this year on NYCHA was of heating. And we looked at the way they tracked individual complaints, and turns out they don't do it particularly well. They had a horrific year in which there were building outages, and they improved their system for addressing a building-wide complaint or a line in a building. But if your apartment is 30 degrees and it's only your apartment, they don't follow that particularly well, and they are not good at getting their contractors out. We looked at systematically at what the problems were. We made robust recommendations, but they are not an agency that the city controls. It has obviously a big influence, and so getting them to change what they're doing has been, it's been a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge for the city as the major constituent interest. It's our population that lives there. We pay the bulk of the money, our citizens, and through our tax levy payments. A couple of other notable audits, also non-city agency. We had an audit of the MTA's contract with Bombardier for new subway trains, which was 3 years overdue. Cost to the city for that delay, in some ways incalculable, because what happened with the delays was you had to run old trains on lines, you had delays for commuters who were not getting to work on time, you had excessive wear and tear, repairs and maintenance that weren't necessary. And as these cars eventually did come online, they immediately broke, and we went back to the old cars again. So real contract management issues, real dollar costs are associated with that. Again, another entity that the city has some influence on, but we do not control what they do. There is a major problem with contract oversight. We pointed those matters out. Our engineering team worked closely with our audit team. It was a great collaboration internally for a really robust, I think, and useful report. And I can only hope the MTA listened to some of what we had to say. Board of Elections is the third entity that we do not control, but we do audit and we do fund. And it implicates all of us and their dysfunction. We feel every time there is an election, we ended up doing a special report there. We had gone in to do an audit. This is partly how we dealt with the pandemic. If we had waited for the BOE to get back to us to do a full GAGAS audit, we never would have been able to issue a report. And so we turned it around for their benefit in the hopes that in the next election, they might actually follow some of the recommendations that we have made and have better trained staff more appropriately assigned to polling places, following the rules, which, as we all know, are only getting more complex, not less, as we have more mail-in voting, and now in the city, ranked choice voting. That will be interesting in the coming year. But we didn't forget mayoral agencies. We had numerous audits of them of note. One of the Parks Department lease with the USTA for operating the tennis center in Flushing. We found underreporting of revenue and therefore underpayments. There it is a story we tell when we audit every one of these leases. It is not unique to the tennis center. where there are complex set of structures for reporting, there is a level at which it's on the honor system, and so management by the agencies are very important and oversight. We continually urge the Parks Department to be more vigilant in its oversight. We did it with this audit as well. The Department of Environmental Protection, we looked at their oversight and maintenance of rain gardens, which might be something you have seen but are not really aware of what they are. They're sort of little green patches, should be lovely in median strips in various places around the city. It's kind of a win-win in that they beautify areas that wouldn't otherwise have any kind of greenery in them, but they also serve as an environmental asset in that they capture runoff. So if you want to prevent runoff from overwhelming our sewer system and sometimes causing, havoc with the sewerage, here they actually absorb the rainwater in the ground, which is what happens in normal places that aren't covered with concrete like New York City. And that really helps our overall wastewater treatment efforts, and it beautifies the area. But sad story from the audit is we found that while a lot of money was spent in an initiative to install them, there was inadequate oversight and maintenance. So all well and good that you plant, but if everything dies because it's not adequately maintained, or if it doesn't just die, it is covered with litter, and so it's not functioning adequately, they're not performing the purpose they should be to help the environment, and they are, it's a waste of money. And then you have to come back and replant. So we're losing out in both ways. We also had a number of our ongoing cybersecurity investigations, which we often do not publish. These are real help the city, help us all kinds of investigations where the team that Andre runs goes in and looks to ensure that the weakest links in the chain are not weak. That is, we are all interconnected in our IT infrastructure. And if our password protections aren't adequate, if patches aren't put on our software at the agency level, it makes the entire city vulnerable. This year, we looked specifically at DDC and at one of the networks that's run by the Department of Health for infectious diseases. The DDC obviously is ensuring our infrastructure is operational, huge from a security point of view if there can be a hack, and the personal information, among other things, that DOH maintains, we know is critical. And so they've done some terrific work there. We also had some notable investigations, one in particular on lead in residential housing. We noted something that we see in the audits quite a bit as well, which is a lack of communication between agencies. And in this case, Department of Health and HPD, we're not leveraging each other's data to efficiently and effectively inspect and eradicate lead in private homes. And really, a robust report was done there through the investigations group, but utilizing a lot of information we've learned on the audit side about these agencies as well. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have. I just really want to thank everybody for giving us an opportunity to talk about what we do and for the support we do get from the audit committee and the work that you do for the city as a whole, because I think the oversight work is critical. And getting the agencies, getting the city as a whole to actually respond to our insights, recommendations, our findings would only make for a better city. So thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. I'll open it up for any questions that any of the members might have.
Yeah, Marjorie, when you put out these reports, and we've asked this before, I think, and there are certain things that look egregious. Where do you get the muscle to try to do something other than write the reports?
You know, the controller has a bully pulpit. Sometimes it's quite effective by issuing the report, issuing a press conference. I think our most effective tool is coming in an audit, to be perfectly honest. Everyone who's with me on this call from the Audit Bureau can tell you of the times in which we walk through the door and say we're here either to audit or investigate, and already they start changing procedures. And as we work with them, as the process we use under general accepted government auditing standards, it's interactive. So we are finding things, we're raising them with the agencies. And when you look at our reports, you'll see any number of them. By the time we get to the end, money's been recouped already. Procedures have been put in place. Reviews have been conducted. That's the most effective work we have, is showing up. Secondly, it's the bully pulpit. Third, pressure. It's pressure that we can get from the likes of a committee like this, and the public when they read in the press what's going on and demanding changes. That's our tools. That's the whole toolbox right there.
My question: would it help you in what you do if we, as the audit committee, summoned a couple of the worst offenders and had to answer questions from us?
It can only help, right? How can it hurt? The more pressure, the more light that's shed on it. What we do is we show what's happening. And if they were to see they were being held accountable by someone other than the controller who comes in every year, that can't hurt. It can only help.
Well, maybe we can discuss that among ourselves as to how far we want to go. My own feeling rather strongly for everybody's to hear the reaction is that there are egregious examples in the paper you circulated of people who did bad things. Elementary matters management wasn't there. And it's the degree of not incompetence, if nothing else. And to the extent that we as an audit committee look at this and don't do anything, I think we're not doing what we should be doing. So I would like to persuade my fellow members, and we'll do that later, that we should pick out the three most terrible examples and invite them to come and talk to us and explain it.
We should have that conversation, at some time, and maybe even later today.
Well,
are there any specific questions regarding this report, the overall report, or specifically to an agency or a program?
I don't want to take up the time now, Mike. Some of the stuff that I read seemed to be so grossly incompetent that I don't understand how those people still have jobs.
Okay.
I just have one question. Can the person who's Josie, can she identify herself? I don't know who that is. Is she part of audit?
Yes,
I'm assuming that's my assistant, Josie Soto.
Yes, that is
okay.
me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
It's nobody in the Daily News.
What it is because there are minutes prepared with all the attendees. So it's a public meeting, so it's just to make sure that we get the records correct.
And Josie's one of those intrepid support staff people who makes all of this possible. So I'm glad she's here.
Okay, thank you. Hearing there's no other questions, I'd like to thank Marjorie and staff for attending the session. And we will be getting back to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your continued interest and support in what we do.
Next on the agenda is I'd like to have recess the open meeting and entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go to executive session.
Second.
You want to take 5 minutes?
For a motion to adjourn?
Well, one thing, the next meeting, we have it scheduled.
June 23rd.
Yeah.
June 23, huh?
At 10 a.m.
You think there's a chance we could do that face to face?
I think we said we're through June and then we'll reevaluate to see where we are after the summer.
And
it's only going to be deferred comp. So I just want to give you guys a heads up. They're meeting with their audit committee the first week of June. So the actual financial statements, I should have them in my possession by like June 15th, and hoping to mail them out to you guys June 16th when I come to the office, and you should get them by the end of that week. So that's the only item on the agenda. So if I have the PDF prior to that, I will email you that. But I've already been in contact with Joan and Beth, at Deferred Comp. So, they don't meet with their audit committee. They don't present their financials until, the very end.
Well, it's significant. I see that June 23 is a holiday for Luxembourg, Latvia, and Estonia. How's that?
I guess we don't live there, so I guess we're going to continue to work.
Okay. And
I'm sorry, Camille. There may be a summer set. We might have to do another meeting because the actuarial audit RFP for the audit firm is ongoing. So that has to come before the audit committee for approval. So we're working with our budget bureau on timing. So
yes,
it might be in July.
Okay. And if we move some of this along on the audit, maybe we could get operations in this executive meeting in one of these dates.
Florham Brady.
If Mark gets his 3 picks out there in time.
Okay. Yeah,
Right enough, I have things to do in the practice of law in the way of these meetings.
Camille, you said it's scheduled for 10 o'clock on the 23rd?
Yes.
Okay.
So it should be a short one. I mean, unless we have an executive session for something. I don't think budget is going to be ready for that date, Katrina. I don't believe so.
No. It doesn't look that way, but we'll keep you posted.
Yeah. We'll keep you guys posted.
Thanks.
Let me raise with my fellows members. When this goes back to the days with the audit committee of the Board of Ed, we sometimes found it very helpful to get the audit committee of one of the things we were dealing with chair to come to the audit committee, one level up in the audit committee in the hierarchy, because sometimes those people are not up to the skill level that you hope, but they don't like to be embarrassed by what their people profess. Maybe it just enhances the local oversight. Have we ever thought about inviting the heads of the audit committees of these various organizations that we look at to our meeting where we review the stuff? And how did the rest of you feel about that?
I don't recall that we've ever had a conversation like that.
Well, I want to raise it with you.
Okay.
If we have, as we some seem to have, a little reluctance, whether these independent people, if they are independent, it's a thought. That's all.
Just remember, we're being recorded right now.
I don't mind recording that.
I guess we could have, when NYCHA comes before us, we could have an audit committee member come before us.
Don't do that to me.
Yeah, I can think of one.
Let me tell you something. You want to take a look at, I will not discuss that.
Be careful, Mark.
Unless the 3 of us are alone. But
okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll move adjourn.
And Brady and Florham, thanks once again.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. Really appreciate it.